This lesson is on how we can use the Pythagorean theorem to help us find distance on the coordinate plane. To find a diagonal distance on the coordinate plane, we're going to create a right triangle where the diagonal is the hypotenuse, or C. And we're going to use the Pythagorean theorem to calculate the diagonal distance. So let's look at an example. Looking at problem 1, I want to draw a right triangle where this diagonal distance between A and B is my hypotenuse. In order to do that, I'm going to come up and over, so a straight line up and a straight line over, and that creates my right angle. To find the length of the legs, I'm just going to count. So from -2 to +3, I know is 5, and from 0 to 4 is 4. So my legs are 5 and 4. So 5 squared plus 4 squared has to equal C squared. So 25 plus 16 will give me C squared. And that gives me 41. And I know that the last step is always to take the square root. So C equals 6.403. Now the instructions said to round to the nearest tenth. That 0 leaves that 4 the same. So segment AB is approximately 6.4. Now let's look at example 2. Again, I'm going to draw that diagonal, and that's going to be my hypotenuse. And then I'm going to draw a straight line up or down and a straight line over. Then I'm going to label my legs. So from +3 to -4 is 7. And I've gone from -4 to -2, which is +2. So I've got legs of 7 and 2. So that's 49 plus 4, which is going to give me 53. Again, my last step is to take that square root on both sides. And I get that C is 7.28, rounded to the nearest tenth becomes approximately 7.3. Now I want you to try number 3 and number 4 on your own. Remember that you can use a calculator and come back to check your answers. Alright, so for number 3, we're going to follow that same process. Draw my hypotenuse, and then I'm going to use straight lines that follow the grid for my legs. So I've got 8 here and 8 here. So 8 squared plus 8 squared equals C squared. 64 plus 64. That gives me 128. I'm going to take that square root, and I get that C is approximately 11.3. Now in number 4, it's nice because they've already drawn the triangle for us. So all we have to do is label our sides. So I know that my diagonal side is C. My two sides that form this right angle are A and B. So A is going to measure 3, and B goes from 1 to 10. That's going to measure 9. So I'll have A as 3 and B is 9. So 3 squared plus 9 squared equals C squared. Last step is to take that square root. And once I've rounded to the nearest tenth, I get that C is approximately 9.5. So EG is approximately 9.5 units. Now we're going to look at some problems where we have to graph the points ourselves. So 5 gives me a point of -6, +1, and -4, +5 as my diagonal. I'm going to draw my straight sides. So I have one leg of 4 and one of 2. So then 4 squared plus 2 squared equals C squared. I'm going to take the square root of both sides. And once I round to the nearest tenth, I get that C is approximately 4.5. So that distance between -6,1 and -4,5 is approximately 4.5 units. Looking at number 6, they gave me -7, -7, and 4, -3. Now I need to draw my straight sides, so I'm going to go straight over and then straight up. I have a leg of 4 and a leg of 11. So 4 squared plus 11 squared. And that gives me 137. I'm going to take the square root of both sides. And I get that C is approximately 11.7. For this last problem, I want you to try it on your own and come back to check your work. All right, looking at number 7, I've got a point of 0, 2, and I've got a point of 7, 7. So when I draw my legs, I've got 5 and 7. Obviously, I'm missing my hypotenuse, which is that diagonal. So I've got 5 squared and 7 squared as legs. When I add 25 and 49, that's going to give me 74. And then I'll take that square root. And the square root of 74 is going to give me approximately 8.6. Now we're going to look at some examples of word problems that involve distance on the coordinate plane. The pentagon on the grid represents the front view of a dollhouse in Kaylin's room. Use the grid to answer questions A and B. If each unit on the grid represents 1 centimeter, list the length of each segment. So the first segment it asks me to find is AB, which is right here. So I'm going to draw my legs and then count them out. So -1 to +7 is going to be 8. -6 to 0 is going to be 6. So for AB, it's going to be 64 plus 36, which is 100. And if I take the square root of 100, it gives me 10. So AB is going to be 10 units. Now let's look at BC. This is looking sort of symmetrical. We'll see. So on the top, I've got 6. And the vertical is 8. So that's the same thing. I'm not going to do that math twice. So this is also 10. Now looking at CD, that's a straight side. I don't need to use the Pythagorean theorem for that. I can just count it. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units. Side DE, I know by counting across the top here that each side was 6, which means that DE is going to be 12. And then I've got AE, or EA, which measures 5 units. Now the next part of the question asks me to find the perimeter of the pentagon, which is just going to be 10 plus 10 plus 5 plus 12 plus 5. So that's 10, 20, 5 and 5 makes 30, plus 12 is 42 units. So now we know that the perimeter of the dollhouse in Kaylin's toy room is 42 units. Now let's look at this next problem. In the graph below, point A represents Aria's house, point B represents Bridget's house, and point C represents Capri's house. Each unit on the graph represents 2 miles. To the nearest tenth, find the distance of the most direct path between each pair of houses. So let's start with Aria and Bridget. So A to B. That's a diagonal, so I'm going to use the Pythagorean theorem to help me out. Now, each unit is 2 miles. So instead of saying that this is 11, I'm going to say it's 22 miles. And instead of saying that this is 5, I'm going to say that it's 10 miles. So 22 squared plus 10 squared equals C squared. 22 squared is 484, plus 100 equals C squared. Now to take that square root to the nearest tenth, I get that AB is 24.2 miles. Now let's look at Bridget and Capri, or B to C. Again, this is a diagonal, so I'm going to use the Pythagorean theorem to help me. Now remember, each unit is actually 2 miles. So instead of saying that this is 5, I'm going to say that it's 10. And instead of saying that this is 9, I'm going to say that it's 18. So for segment BC, I've got 10 squared plus 18 squared. So that's 100 plus 324. When I take the square root, that's going to give me approximately 20.6. And lastly, we'll take a look at Arietta Capri's house. Might have to use a smaller highlighter for that one. And again, I can use the Pythagorean theorem to help me. So I've got a side of 4 because it's 2 units, which is 4 miles. And a side of 10, which is actually 20. So 4 squared plus 20 squared. So 16 plus 400. And when I find that square root, I get approximately 20.4. So now we've looked at a bunch of different ways that we can use the Pythagorean theorem to help us find distance on the coordinate plane. Remember, we're always just going to create a right triangle where the distance between our 2 points is the hypotenuse.